Next, a panel discussion concerning media coverage of environmental issues. This forum took place earlier this week at the United Nations Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Leaders from more than 100 nations are gathering to propose solutions to world environmental concerns. This panel features Ted Turner, President and Chairman of the Board of Turner Broadcasting System. He was joined by representatives of various international media organizations. The panelists discussed public perception of media coverage when it relates to the environment. And in about 90 minutes, we will continue our coverage from Rio de Janeiro as representatives of the United States, Japanese, and British delegations share their views on this Earth Summit.
Yeah, I think, no. Okay, you find out now. Maurice,
Here, okay. Ted, you're here.
yes, sir.
Is that real snake skin or crocodile?
Thank you.
Dangerous species?
None of them.
Sure. Don't worry, you're fine. I'm a mayor. Don't even worry about the next thing. I want to see you this evening. Okay, thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a very great pleasure today. I get more than my fair share of the pleasures, none more appreciated than the one I now have. This panel on communications and perceptions really addresses one of the fundamental differences between this and all other conferences. It is not only a conference which is attracting more world leaders than any other world conference. It is a conference in which the people of the world are fully and totally involved. And I am delighted that we have as the chairman of this panel the person who more than any other on this planet has changed the nature of communications, made it possible for great events like this to be fully participatory events. And if it is true, and it is true, that more media are at this conference than have ever been at any other conference, I think greatest single thanks goes to Ted Turner. Let me tell you a little personal side. You all know Ted Turner, but from my point of view, I really have the greatest reason for gratitude in introducing him today, because early on, when nobody had heard about UNCED and nobody had heard about the Earth Summit, Ted Turner committed himself. He saw its possibilities. Not only saw them, he committed his networks, and he was out front in bringing the messages of UNCED and on Earth Summit to the rest of the world. Unfortunately, the rest of the world has caught up, and that's a good. Now, it was said of CNN in the Gulf War that they changed the nature of participatory warfare. It's true of this conference that CNN has been in the lead through Ted's vision in changing the nature of world conferences. No world conference will ever be the same after this, Ted, because thanks to your initiative, this conference is a conference of people. They're getting the signals, they're responding to those signals every day. They are with us at this conference, and that's what gives me confidence that when the world leaders gather for the final decisions next week, their positions are going to be changed because the rest of the people are connected. And no one has helped to do that. Let me just add one more word. Ted Turner has been out front in so many of these issues. When it was unpopular, I remember, Ted, when on your networks you were carrying material on nuclear war, on East-West reconciliation, when that cost you advertising, cost you a lot of caustic comments. Ted has helped to shape a better world, to make that better world, and I'm delighted, Ted, that you are going to chair this panel. And I won't introduce each of the other distinguished panel members, that's your job, but through you, I want to welcome and thank them as well. And this, you didn't come here to listen to me, but I couldn't help take a few minutes, Ted, just to tell you in front of this audience how much I appreciate all you have done for this conference and for our world community.
Thank you, Maurice. Appreciate that. Thank you, Maurice, and thanks everybody for attending this panel on the environment and the media. We have 4 panelists. I'm fourth. We're going to go in alphabetical order. We will make each approximately 8-minute opening statement. We'll then have a very brief discussion amongst ourselves. If there are any points that we'd like to argue about or make based upon what the other panelists say, and then we'll throw it open to questioning, and we'll be out of here in an hour and 15 minutes. Our first panelist today, sitting right on my left, is Ms. Wagaki Mawanji. She is the International Coordinator of the International Youth Development and Environment Network and Assistant Coordinator of the African Youth Coordination on Development and Environment. She's a professional journalist, having trained in mass communications at the postgraduate level. Recently she started producing a newsletter, Eco News Africa, for African grassroots NGOs around issues being discussed by UNCED and getting feedback from these groups on what they see as the solutions. She's also engaged in research on projects for young women in rural areas in order to curb the rural-urban migration. She's involved with youth activities for UNCED since the 3rd preparatory meeting, Youth 92 for Action for Solidarity, Equality, Environment, and Development. Ms. Waganji.
Thank you very much. I'm going to base my talk a little bit on the history of development in the world today. And development as we know it today has gone through 3 phases, and we are right now in the 3rd phase. The first one was the agricultural phase, and then came the industrial age, and now we're into the electronic age. And the electronic age is very important because, as you see, the world has become a small place. We'll get all the news, any kind of information at the turn of a button. And one of the things I'd really like to point out is that there has been a media explosion, an information explosion for that matter. Presently, in the 3rd world, according to the World Communication Report by UNESCO, there has been an increase of radio sets or television sets in developing countries by approximately 400%, and in the developing world by about 40%. Now, we have about an average of 1 billion TV sets in the world, which gives us like 1 TV set to 5 people all over the world. And we also have an average of 2 billion radio sets all over the world. But what's very interesting is that there are very great disparities in the kind of media ownership or information ownership in the world today. We have some countries in the south, for instance, Malawi, that don't even have a television station. And we have an average of, say, 2 televisions in every American household. Now, it's very, very clear that the media have been at the forefront of promoting the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development. And if I had not attended the preparatory meetings, one of the things I'm sure I'd have learned was about UNCED through the programs, for instance, the developing stories that came through the media. Now, I think it's very important that media be at the forefront of information dissemination. Why? The kind of news coverage today, or what is really of news value, is very different in the North and the South. In the North, it's what is conflict. In the North, it's personality. And if, whereas in the South, we are still using those as news values, but if we are talking about sustainable development, it's very obvious the news values have to change. What we have seen today is demonstrations or actions by people from the indigenous communities. And why? It is because they have something to say and they need to say it, but unfortunately they are not personalities. And they probably have a lot of solutions to what we're discussing today. It's very, very important to have information flowing not just from the north to the south, but from the south to the north. And I will talk from my experience, not just as a journalist, but as a person coming from the south. I am constantly struggling with information that has some cultural domination. Let me explain what I have to say. When we talk about sustainable development, one of the hot issues around has been overconsumption. And oftentimes we don't realize just how much promotion of overconsumption of consumerist patterns the media have done. An example of this is most of the people from the north actually buy their products straight from the TV set. A new product is launched and it's straight in the media being advertised. It's good. For us media producers, we make some money and that keeps our businesses going. But what does that mean? We're not just getting values from our basic needs, but values that come through the media. Taking wine, for example, is not just taking wine from a glass, but it's a wine glass, and that is advertised through the kind of movies we watch. A typical James Bond movie shows, you know, what life should be. And let me just give an example of how a James Bond movie just translates our reality. That is not actually reality. Typically, if you watch a James Bond, you know there's going to be whining, there's going to be dining, and there's going to be women. And if you look at the kind of surroundings that that kind of a movie will portray, is lush, green environs that are, you know, very comfortable, and ideally it's a nice place to be. And what does that communicate to the southern person? That living in a tropical forest region, having a nice habitation in, say, for example, a tropical forest, is primitive. There's some movies that actually portray, for instance, the semi-arid or savanna areas in Africa as the wild jungle where the primitive live. And unfortunately, that sometimes has a negative impact in that the people who live there and probably are living sustainably then begin to idealize a different way of life. Now, that's shaping our values, and that's something that the media really have to take into account if they're really going to promote sustainable development. And secondly, we have, it's been widely said that cultural diversity is very important if we're going to have sustainable development. It amazes me that we talk about biological diversity, but we're not talking about cultural diversity. But how do you integrate cultural diversity into the media, which is primarily dominated by the North, so to speak? One of the things we have resolved in the South to do, as a journalist, one of the things we are doing is trying to get theater, popular theater, into the mainstream of media, so that instead of having people sitting and just discussing about environment, we have recitals, we have drama, we have dance, so that we have theater for development, which is very important. Our culture has often been used for entertainment, but our culture was primarily for education. And if we do not use that culture to teach the people, if we do not use that culture through the media channels to disseminate information, it means we're not communicating with the people we want to communicate with. I've looked at the Agenda 21 and it says that media should use popular theater. But what does that mean? It means taking the people who live in those areas where the culture is still being practiced and using their kind of way of life to communicate information to the public. Now, this has various advantages. Culture transcends language barriers or language communication. And if it's a dance, whether you're from the north or from the south, a dance will always communicate information to you, and that's very important. But I want to make some recommendations about the kind of thing that the media should also need from the governments and from us NGOs. We've been talking a lot about popular participation, and everybody agrees that for sustainable development to be achieved, there must be popular participation. But this is not going to happen if people do not get the information they need. Now, unfortunately today, people have withheld information from people in order to govern. And everyone knows that information is power. And if we are going to achieve sustainable development, it is very, very important that that kind of censorship of information from the media should be reduced to the minimum. And I realize that this is difficult, but that is what democracy is all about. That's what popular participation is all about. And if we're talking about freedom of information, the right to know, that is not going to happen where journalists are being whipped left, right, and taken through rigorous problems because they have received some information that for some government or for some governor it's detrimental. So that's going to be very, very important. And finally, there needs to be decentralization of information. A lot of the TV stations, a lot of the radio stations, a lot of the print media is actually controlled by mega companies, let me say. And it is very important to have community-based radio stations, community-based information centers that are going to enable people within the community to disseminate information to other communities, not just amongst themselves, but to other communities. If they have a solution, how is the rest of the world going to know? They have to have a channel through which they can communicate, a channel that should not have language limitations, a channel that should not have a limitation, financial limitation, and you can only do that where there's decentralization. I'll leave the rest to the question time. Thank you.
Thanks for that very important statement. Next we have a very interesting gentleman from Japan, Mr. Shigeyuki Okajima. He graduated from Sophia University in German literature, later studied plant ecology at the University of Washington. He joined the Yomiuri Shimbun newspaper in 1969 and presently, since 1990, serves as Deputy Chief of the Commentary Department in charge of environmental issues. Mr. Okajima also serves as Vice President of the Japanese Forum of Environmental Journalists. He has covered the City News Department, the Metropolitan Police Department, and made journeys to Canada, the North Pole, China, Tibet, almost to the top of Mount Everest, and Nepal. Since 1981, he's been assigned to cover the Environment Agency and has also covered the special conference of UNEP, attended UNEP Nairobi Journalist Conference in 1986, and accompanied the Global Public Hearings Tour of the United Nations World Committee on Environment and Development, reporting from the Soviet Union, Europe, and Mexico. He's been awarded the Global 500 Award by the United Nations. He served as chief desk for the Seoul Olympic Games, the Only One Earth series, and covered stories from the tropical rainforests of the Amazon. Mr. Okajima.
Thank you very much. First, I'd like to say my English is poor, so I prepared a paper. So then I'm trying to speak along the paper. And after that, if you had any question, please ask me using easy words and speak slowly. So in the case I can understand. Okay. So today I'd like to talk on 3 points. Firstly, my basic theory toward reporting. This means environmental destruction is mostly caused by people's luxury lifestyle in the developed countries. Secondly, the organization of a Japanese reporting system for this international conference. Lastly, a suggestion to set up some kind of communication system, network system between journalists, electronic mail system through computers, perhaps like EcoNet. Then now to go back to the first point. There are 5.5 million people living on this planet. Is it possible for every one of them to have and to enjoy the same high standard lifestyle as Americans or Japanese? No, I think it is not possible. The environmental situation cannot support that. In order to standardize all people's lifestyle, the people who live in the developed countries have to cut their energy consumption down to share it with the people in the developing countries. Though you cannot find any suggestions related to this problem at any environmental meetings held between governments, while the people in the developed countries continue their level of lifestyle as high as now. The people in the developing countries, 3/4 of the total population, are forced to limit the usage of energy because of the environmental situation. It means the developing countries will not be able to develop any more than they are now in future. For this reason, we should seriously discuss cutting down the energy wasted in the developed countries before saying anything about environmental destruction. We had better say, save the rainforest and save energy, rather than just say save the rainforest. Here at UNCED, people from the developed countries have to question yourselves about your responsibilities. Also, not just try to raise money, try to find a way of developing those countries without making the same mistakes as people in the developed countries made. This is my basic theory towards reporting. The second point about environmental reporting of Japan. In this conference, more than 200 people are attending. From our newspaper, 15 people are working for it. 7 people from Tokyo, 3 from New York and Washington, 1 special correspondent from here in Rio, 2 cameramen, and 2 communication engineers. A total of 15 people are working every day to report on UNCED. The reports are covering the front page and more on other pages of our newspaper every day. Our newspaper is circulating 9.8 million copies of the morning edition every day and 5 million evening papers. Other major newspapers are doing similar work It means that most people in Japan know the details about UNCED, about the Rio Declaration, Agenda 21, Climate Change Convention, the Biodiversity Convention. Detailed reports are printed in the papers. I gather that even ordinary people in Japan understand about environmental problems on the earth by reporting our reports on UNCED. The intellectuals and the specialists are very knowledgeable about the issues, though some ordinary people do not know even those problems exist. Compared to other countries, I think Japan is one of the countries where a lot of environmental problem issues are reported, even though this is a difficult field for ordinary people to understand fully. Therefore, UNCED is a good occasion for us to make them understand how important environmental issues are. And lastly, I'd like to suggest to set up some kind of communication network system between the journalists who are interested in the environmental problems. The easiest system will be electric mail using computers. Each country has a small-sized computer and use it as a key station. The journalists can communicate with each other through the computers. It would be difficult to set up 250 computers at once, but a small-sized personal computer could be used if it is only for an electric mail system. Then it is not that difficult for every country to set up, and no time is needed. Money has to be raised from somewhere towards telephone bills. When you think how effectively we can use this system, it is worth a lot more than it actually costs. I strongly suggest this to UNEP. It would be a good idea to draw a line here, not to interfere with journalists' independence. So I'd like to finish my talk now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shizuyuki. Before I introduce our next panelist, I just want to say that if any of the U.S. delegation doubts the reality of global warming, they ought to be in this room today. And my other two panelists here are welcome to take off their coats if they would like to. Otherwise, they'll be a lot lighter when this session is over than when they came in. Okay, the next member of the panel is Mr. Pedro Simoncini. He's an Argentinian lawyer. He started private television in Buenos Aires, Argentina in 1961 and has been active in broadcasting, advertising, and related activities ever since. In 1973, the Argentinian government expropriated all private stations in Buenos Aires. The present government of Dr. Carlos Menem has turned them back to private hands, and Mr. Simoncini is now chairman of Channel 11, renamed Telefe, which has become the #1 network in Argentina. He comes to UNCED as delegate of the International Council of the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, with an important message of commitment of the international broadcasters to further the understanding of environmental problems and solutions. Pedro.
Thank you, Ted. The International Council of the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences is composed by the highest level of officers of public and private television organizations of the world. It's a non-profit organization for the enhancement of television industry the world over, the search of excellence in programming, the cooperation for the international dissemination of issues and projects of global importance. Promoted and fueled by this meeting of the Earth Summit, the International Council has approved the following television resolution we are announcing today as the first global commitment of the international television with the solution of environmental problems. Mass communications is the key to informing the general population on global issues. Indeed, television has a unique opportunity to deal with the international scale of issues concerning the environment. We, the members of the Board of Directors of the International Council of the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, USA, share an interest in raising awareness of those issues requiring action to better our Earth's future. We dedicate ourselves and the available resources of our industry to develop a television strategic response to further the goals of Agenda 21. We shall work in cooperation with the United Nations to disseminate the importance and relevance of the United Nations resolutions and those activities designed to implement Agenda 21. Our goals are: 1, to further awareness and understanding of environmental issues through global television programming. 2, to assist in the greater dissemination around the world of environmental programs. 3, to develop procedures to facilitate funding and co-production of environmental programs. We therefore have agreed: 1, to encourage the dedication of significantly increased airtime to the environment during the ensuing broadcast years, including public service announcements, drama, documentaries, and news and public affairs coverage. 2, to develop the precedents set by the European and Japanese public service broadcasting partners in the One World initiative in making program output available for free or at cost to broadcasters in low-income developing nations and Central and Eastern European broadcasters via the United Nations sponsored International Television Trust for the Environment and other relevant distribution outlets. 3, to commit to an inter-union, intermedia organization meeting to facilitate these activities, goals, and resolutions. A report on these activities will be made to the Board of Directors of the International Council of the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences by the Environmental Committee. 4, to an agenda for future collaboration which should include: A, the creation of training programs, internship funds, and/or other collaborative procedures between broadcasters in developing nations and their colleagues in developed countries. B, the encouragement of programs in all genres to deal with environmental themes and to do so in an accurate and sensitive manner. C, the creation of an annual event that recognizes achievements in meeting these programming objectives, possibly under continued United Nations auspices. This is the end. Thank you, gentlemen. Excuse me, just for your information, at the end of these meetings, there are going to be copies in English and Spanish of this declaration here on the table, will be available to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Pedro, and I've already been introduced, and I'll make my approximately 8-minute opening statement. I'm just absolutely delighted, excited, and optimistic that this conference is being held. The very fact that it's being held is recognition that the whole world agrees that we have a very serious series of problems here. There's some disagreements over which ones are the most important, and in different parts of the world the problems are different, but generally we're in agreement. And also we're in agreement that the problems can only be solved together, that these are transnational problems that can only be solved together. And really, this is really probably the first time in the history of the world on something of such a massive scale. I know many years ago, or not too many years ago, a group like this banned whaling. And that actually the banning of whaling occurred before the end of the Cold War. Those of us that were working on trying to end the Cold War by bringing the United States and the former Soviet Union together, I know I enjoyed saying, well, if we can stop killing the whales, maybe we can stop killing each other. And basically, even though there are a number of civil wars going on in the world, that at the current time there are no transborder wars going on at the current time. We're closer to peace than we've ever been, and really, until the Cold War ended, we couldn't really move to the environment, because when nations are at war, that consumes all their resources, all their thought, and all their energies, and they can't deal with other problems. So we couldn't have had this conference, and it couldn't have been as successful as it is today, had it not been for the end of the Cold War. And the very fact that we were successful in doing that means that we can be successful in this. My father had an old saying. He said, what the mind of man can conceive and believe, the mind of man can achieve. And really, there is no reason on earth why at some point in the future every person should not have available to them decent housing, adequate food, energy, education, and rights. There is absolutely no reason, after having gone to the moon and done all the other incredible things, satellite television, and all the other things that we've done, that we can't solve these problems. Now, it's going to take, how do we do it? We do it together. And that's what this panel is about, is where the media fits in. I mean, governments can't do it alone. No one individual can do it by themselves. We all got to do it together. And the media's role is extremely important, because the media is how people get their news and information and entertainment, in most cases. And it encompasses all forms of the media, and even in villages that are very remote, just passing on by word of mouth. So the media is desperately important, and all we got to do is stick with it. We got to keep letting people know what the problems are and what the solutions are. And we have all the solutions. I mean, I've read over, well, I study this issue, or these issues, a lot, and I've read just about everything that's been written on the subject, and the materials that have come out at this conference, the briefing books and so forth, list all the problems, and they list the solutions as well. And before this meeting is over, there are going to be a lot of treaties signed in a lot of these areas. We're not going to get everything that we want here, but it would really be a shame, I think, if we solved all these problems here and now, right today, because what would we do for the rest of our lives? I mean, it would be dull and uninteresting if we solved all the human problems and environmental problems. If we went away from here and starting day after tomorrow, every kid had adequate food, health care, and education. In fact, if there hadn't been a Cold War, which in today's dollars, between the U.S. and the Soviet Union and their prospective allies, it's estimated about $8 trillion was wasted on armaments during the last 40 years. And the figures I've seen, that a third of that money that went into the arms race, had it been used during the last 40 years to improve the human condition, everybody would have all the things that they need right now. So we just squandered the money. We, like a reckless gamble, we took our life savings and went down to Las Vegas and gambled it away in one night. But now it's over. The war's over. The two superpowers are pretty much in financial ruin. The Soviet Union is already economically collapsed, and the United States is carrying a $4 trillion debt. That's 40 times as much as the debt of Brazil. The United States is the brokest nation on earth. And Japan and Germany can come in here and throw a lot of money around because they got it. You know, it's because they didn't get in the arms race. They're smart. That's right. That's exactly right. And so when our president is a little tight with the purse strings, he's operating the brokest country on earth. But still, the United States should make its fair share contribution, because we can cut back now on the military, because we don't need nearly the force that we did in the past, because we don't have any big enemies. And heck, we may have a world very soon where we don't have any enemies except our next door neighbors and in a few parts of the world. And it seems to be contagious around the Middle East. You know, even all the stuff up in Yugoslavia is only a few hundred miles from there. It just seems to rub off over there. But that's the last place. That's the last place where there's any serious conflict going on. And at least they are meeting and having discussions. And I think the media has had an important role in that, as it is in this. I mean, I think it's very clear now that the environment and the environment, I think there are many things that impact the destruction of the environment, and I know that it's controversial. Of course, there are three things. One is the high consumption rate in the West. I'll start with my part of the world. And the low status of women in a lot of the world is another significant factor. In almost every country where women have equality, true equality in every way, equality, education, equality of opportunity to go into business, the environment and population pressures have, to a large degree, have abated. But the role of women everywhere is not equal, and that's certainly something that should be given heavy stress. And if that is done, that will, to a large degree, take care of everybody likes to call it the demographic problem around here, but it's also, in my opinion, that we're just producing people faster than the world can support them. But final statement on the media. The media just needs to keep this on the agenda, and I know with CNN, our news media, we run environmental stories virtually every day because we think it's extremely important, and we try and get these stories from all over the world, and we just don't use our own correspondence, but we use our network through the CNN World Report, where we have 140 different nations, the indigenous broadcasters to those countries sending us material, and we rebroadcast that as well. So that really ends what I have to say. Why don't we just see, just a second, Kristen, if any of the panelists would like to make a further comment before we go into the question and answer period. Would you?
No.
Okay, no? You want to pick? Go right ahead.
Oh,
right ahead.
just to take the words of Ted, I want to tell you that what CNN is doing is just an example for all of us, the broadcasters all over the world. And take, for example, ourselves in Argentina, in our channel, we are starting to become also, let's call, an ecological channel. And we have done something very simple. We haven't worried too much. We are trying to imitate all the good things we see on the screen of CNN or TNT. And we only beg Ted not to overcharge us for the copyrights.
Would you like to say anything?
Yeah, sure.
Right ahead.
One thing I would like to underscore about the media that somebody spoke about the independence of the media. I think one really critical factor here is the support of the transnational corporations, which have successfully been able to keep themselves out of the UNCED agenda. And I fear that in future, if the media itself is not independent of the transnational corporations, then we are dead ducks. And I think it's very, very important that although we have to be financed by the commercial, the transnational corporations, it's very, very important not only to be independent of our governments, but also to be independent of other organizations that support us. I know that if my sponsor, if I discovered a funny story about my sponsor, let's say, it's very difficult for me to say what I have to say, but I think as journalists, we owe it to the people to give them that kind of information, and that's really going to help us. But, and I'm not sure that President Bush is running on such an economy, and that's the reason why he's not making decisions, but I think his government is really supported by the TNCs, and that has an effect on what he has to say. So it's very important that the media remain very, very independent.
Good point. Good point. All right. Okay. Let me just say that I'm going to start. We're going to start the question and answer period. Would you please, if you want the question asked by a specific person, please say who the question is for. Okay. Go ahead.
Right here. This was the first one I saw.
Yes, Mr. Turner. This is Trevor Davis from the United States, United Church of Christ. We anticipate hearing a lot from President Bush about jobs and how the environment might reduce the number of jobs available. And I'd like to find out your opinion of this relationship and if you think jobs can indeed increase as a result of improved environmental support.
Well, I think that this thing about that improving the environment is going to cost jobs is a bunch of bull. First of all, when you just move money, you move money over and move jobs from destroying the environment to saving the environment. For instance, if loggers become unemployed, it's because they've cut down most of the trees anyway. Why not employ the loggers to plant trees where there ain't no more trees? It's very, very simple. I think if we, in my opinion, high tech, because all this new stuff that we're going to be doing for cleaner energy and so forth is going to be whole new industries that are going to give employment like the likes of which the world has never seen in clean things that people are proud to do rather than ashamed to do, which is tear the natural world up.
Next.
My name is Mahendra Shah. Mr. Turner, you mentioned the issue of armament expenditures. The annual advertising revenue, the expenditure on that is some $400 to $500 billion. Now the question is...
This advertising revenue?
Revenue. Just
Okay,
the expenditure.
is that worldwide?
Worldwide advertising expenditure is something like $500 billion, which is almost 5 times the Agenda 21 assessment. The question is the following, that the media has perhaps the most crucial role. Because if you look at the developed countries, the whole issue of overconsumption is driven by the media, as Mrs. Mwangi mentioned. If you look at the developing countries, all of us in the developing countries aspire for overconsumption and rich lifestyles as a result of what we see on the media. Now the challenge to the media is how can we change this? On the one side, your revenue comes from it. On the other side, unless we do it, the whole sustainability issue is in danger. Thank you.
Well, okay, that's a very good point, but I really don't think that it's really because of advertising that the consumption in the developed world is greater than it is in the developing world. I think it's a question of wealth. If it's a question of wealth, because in the developing world there are rich people. And they live as high on the hog as the rich people do, or even higher. And there's a greater discrepancy in a lot of those countries than there is between the lowest income and the highest income. Central and South America, perfect examples where we are now, where they have a few very rich, many very poor, where in the United States and Europe, we have a large middle classes. And those people drive Rolls Royces and Mercedes automobiles too, and everybody would do it if they could. Only trouble is we're learning now that these big cars are damaging to the environment. I drive a small car. 15 years ago, I drove a big car, but I got in a small car, and I've got wealth, and I don't use air conditioning. We're not using it in here either, but I live in a hot place. It's not that much of a correlation. Basically, we're all going to pig out if we can. We have to learn and develop ourselves so that we use as little as we can, that we live simply so others may simply live. But that's the real trick, and that requires education. It should be in the schools and in the media as well. But you have a partial problem there, no question about it.
Well, I'm Anna Hess from the printed press in Norway. I have one question for Ted Turner and one from Wangaki. From what we have heard, they've closed the water and electricity down at the Global Forum. And since you are a multi-million-dollar capitalist, I wonder, can you do anything about that to help these people close down the Global Forum with dignity? I only need a short answer. And from Wangaki, I need a longer one. Can a journalist be objective? Thank you.
Why don't you go first?
You got the question first. Well, it is difficult for a journalist to be objective, and I'll tell you why. Even if by all standards I was objective in terms of the news I got, I also have my own personal biases, and my style of writing, for instance, comes into play. And since what we see and what we get of reality is what is communicated to us, I would say that although journalists try to be objective, they have their politics for one, and you always sometimes have to take everything a journalist says with a pinch of salt, because whatever information is put in is as important as whatever information is left out. So that is really a difficult question to answer, but I would say basically it's impossible to be objective as we know objectivity.
And your question for me, if you'll write me, I'll take a look at it.
$1 million we're talking about.
Well, yeah, but I'm not going to give you $1 million. I might give you $1 or two.
This is a question to Mwangi. You said that it is very difficult to be impartial. The journalists can't be very impartial. But at the same time, how will you make them to really talk the environmental friendly language without being aligned to one personality or the other? It is a very difficult question, but how will you really make it?
Just please, can you ask that question again? It wasn't very clear.
No, how will you really bring about value changes among the journalists, media persons, without trying to portray more of the James Bond culture?
I think it's very important to be aware of the kind of public you're selling your product to. But I think this really has also to do with what the governments have to do. I know we have a right to information, but we also have to be very sensitive to the cultures of the people. And this is really a moral question. It's very important for people to realize that we are not just out to sell.
The world, how can this be invested in environment? Because this is probably the most important issue in the world. And the other question regarding global nations can do is something.
But sometimes you sell and you sell yourselves to death. And it's really a question of you also deciding what to take and what not to take. And how, looking at the pros and cons, just like we're doing on environment and development, and weighing that and deciding whether to do it or not.
I am Tiahoga Ruge from Mexico. I have a question for Mr. Ted Turner. 2 questions. In this conference, and especially here in your comment, that the US is broke and therefore cannot invest as much in environment as other nations can do, is something I think all the underdeveloped world at least would feel just very indignated about, especially in a country where so much money is being invested in armament. I have 2 questions on this. One is, how can the media help to bring this money that is being invested in armament to kill people around the world? How can this be invested in environment? Because this is probably the most important issue in the world. And the other question regarding the Global Forum, which represents all the independent people in this world that are expressing their ideas, and that are people that have been working in environment all their lives long. How can a media like CNN help to raise the money to help the Global Forum to come to a very dignified ending? We are not asking you to put it up, but how can the media help that the Global forum, the independent people of this world can finish their forum with the same dignity as the official forum. Thank you very much.
The first question, it is the greatest waste of resources that ever occurred in the history of the world was the Cold War. And even though virtually no shots were fired between the Soviets and the U.S., millions of people died because of it. The war was fought in Korea, was fought in Afghanistan, was fought in Vietnam, it was fought in Nicaragua, was fought all over Africa. The war was fought all over the place, and that money was wasted, and lots of lives in poverty have occurred. And we're finding, and I just came back, I was in Russia 2 weeks ago. They're having difficulty too, because economies get hooked on the military-industrial complex, where hundreds of thousands, millions of jobs, factories, that's all that they produce. And it's like trying to get off heroin or cocaine. It's not easy to make those changes. Both our countries are trying to do it. From a layman's standpoint, it seems awfully slow in the case of the United States. I read just a couple of days ago that our military budget for this year is going to be like $270 billion, down from $300 billion, but just a 10% reduction. So it's difficult. It's difficult to do. But I'm certainly for it being done, and for some of those monies to be channeled into helping out in the rest of the world. And the second question, I really don't know enough about. I just got here, and I'm going to be at the Global Forum tomorrow, and I'll learn more about what it is that they're trying to do. I imagine their agenda is pretty similar to the meeting over here. Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Turner, I'm Errol Court from Toronto. And I want to say that it's wonderful to meet you, and I appreciate tremendously what you and your network are doing. I also want to say that I feel that the people at the Global Forum are really representing the people of the world at large. And many of the people who come here who are taking orders are misrepresenting the people of the world. And what I would like to have from you, and maybe others on the panel who would like to comment, is the understanding of what the individual and what we can do as individuals. I feel every one of us can make a difference, and together we can change this world. We are not going to pig out, we are going to work for the world, as the Dalai Lama said the other day, and I think you can help us and encourage us. Perhaps you people would like to make a comment on that. Well, thank you very much.
So that's, I think, a pretty easy one too. Why don't we start down at the end, if you'd like to say something, what we can do as individuals.
I think our role is to tell the facts to the people. That's only. I am a journalist. I am working in the environmental field, but basically I am a journalist. So I am not environmentalist. Then journalists should tell the fact to other people. That is my main role. So I'm doing on the NGO forum. So they are now needing. They need $2 million US dollars. I'm writing through my paper. That's my role, I think.
I think that people should get organized, should keep fighting. And we on our side, we as broadcasters, I'm speaking on behalf of television mainly, we should be open to all the issues and to all the ideas that you should bring. But basically, I think that the problems that we are facing are too big and there are too many, and that we need a minimum of organization. And I see too many people talking of too many issues all at the same time. Yeah. And I would recommend just to get something in order, and for the stations just to be available for the organized expressions of ideas and projects and solutions. Because here there is one thing in which we have all to agree. We are facing problems, but we must come up with solutions, because problems we know there are, but we have to find solutions.
Yes. Well, I'd like to say that each one of us has a responsibility towards starting to live as we ought. That's number one. But secondly, journalists are not going to be able to do the job if you as NGOs do not assist them. We have to get information that you get access to. I know that NGOs sometimes get a lot of information that is normally not accessible to journalists, although journalists I know are very investigative. And it's very important for NGOs, whatever information you get, whatever discoveries you make, I know there are research institutes here, if you find any problems or if you find any information that the public should know, it is important for you to also be bold enough to forward that information to the media. I see that's the way we can work together. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm Lita Heiding from Norway. I have a proposal, a challenge, and a question to Ted Turner. And I have a question also to you, Mange. You said that the advertisers don't advertise other things that the people want. But I would propose to you and challenge to you, you have a marvelous channel, and I listen to it wherever I go in the world, and I travel a lot. And I'm a publisher myself of a health and environmental magazine in Norway for 17 years. And I refuse advertisements not going along with the moral of my magazine. That means I refuse Coca-Cola, I refuse Pepsi-Cola, I refuse chemical fertilizers, I refuse all these products which are destroying us and destroying the nature. So, Mr. Ted Turner, you are much more mighty man than I am. I'm a poor woman, but I'm a idealist. So why don't you refuse all these horrible junk food advertisements that we see all the time in USA?
I'd need some of that money from somewhere where we're going to clean up how would we support our media?
Well, I support myself, and I refuse. And you are a rich man. I'm a poor woman. It can be done. Okay. Short question for you.
It's a problem, but I really don't think Coca-Cola and Pepsi are destroying the environment.
It's destroying our health. Okay, to you, toxic chemicals and nutrition. You know fertilizers are destroying our soil, toxic chemicals are destroying our food. You are the future, and Mr. Bush's babies and grandchildren are also the future. So what are you going to do with it? Why don't you boycott toxic chemical products? Poisonous, killing us.
This question is to Mr. Turner. My name is Bill Day from the United States. We talk about all these programs you said through education. My question here is focused on the road after Rio. How are we going to focus maybe some programming through education reforms to hopefully, establish some kind of prosperity so the students in America will understand what's going on outside after this conference? I feel so much that after this Rio celebration or this gathering of all these world leaders, people are going to forget things in the United States, and it's our job, your job, to really promote this. Are there any programs, specialized, maybe educational programs, you can focus on through the television to help them and say, listen, this is a continuing process, we're going to keep going forward, and we have things to look at, and we're going to promote it? Do you have anything lined up in that way? Because I'd like to know. Thank you.
Absolutely. First of all, we don't just attack it from a Turner Broadcasting. We don't just attack it from a news and journalistic standpoint. We have a children's program called Captain Planet that was started 3 years ago that runs weekly in the United States and is in some 80 countries around the world, where a group of kids are out working to save the environment. So it's easy for little kids to see. It's a cartoon series. We also have a daily news program without commercials for high schools and junior high schools in the United States that has a weekly 8-minute piece on the environment that's shown in, I think, 20,000 schools around the country. And we do documentaries with Audubon, Cousteau, and National Geographic that usually focus a great deal on environmental areas, and we do environmental stories on CNN almost every day, and we're doing it 5 years ago. We're doing it up before the conference. We'll be doing it after the conference until the last axe has been put away, when they stop cutting the trees down. Ms. Amanpour, CNN.
Indeed. I'd like to just ask you a question specifically. What role do you think the media has to play in promoting environmental issues, without necessarily talking just about CNN, but in general, what role and how should the media do it?
Well, I think we've been talking about that. I would just say once again, by getting the issues out there, by constantly, it's a big subject. It's got 20 or 30 different avenues and aspects to it, and just every day have something on it, whether you're a newspaper, radio station, just keep, the wheel that squeaks the loudest gets the most oil. That translates into every language. Keep it out there. Keep it in front of people.
Yes, Desiree McGraw from Canada. I have a question about the media coverage of UNCED in particular. I think it's safe to say that the coverage of UNCED has been largely negative, and I wonder what responsibility the media has had in the actual outcome of the UNCED process. I know for the average citizen, to see the media basically dismiss UNCED prematurely as a failure certainly takes away the public's legitimate expectations for this conference. And so what is the responsibility in predicting this kind of failure? And also, what will be the responsibility and the role of the media in a post-UNCED area where we're actually looking at the implementation? And also for Wagaki, you talked about objectivity, and I'd like you to comment on the fact that it seems that the media's notion of objectivity is usually negativity. And how do we counter that? How do we have a media that is looking more at positive angles of this whole process? So what is the role and responsibility of the media? Thank you.
Yes, you want to go first? Where are you from? You're from the United States, aren't you? From Canada, okay. Infected.
One of the problems with the kind of news coverage today, like I said, is just the news values. What really is a news value? And maybe I'll also cover what you've talked about, the coverage of the UNCED process. Now, one of the values is that what is news has to be timely. Now, the preparations for the UNCED, for instance, started 2 years ago. And now we have the heads of state coming, so UNCED all of a sudden is very important. But we must not forget that the key players were not the presidents who are coming to put a signature, but the people who've been doing it over the last few months, and that's exactly what I'm saying. That the problem with sometimes what the media are doing is that the values that they have placed today are not necessarily promoting sustainable development. Now, it's possible that we have left out some solutions somewhere because we've merely covered UNCED over the last 1 or 2 months. And so that's one shortfall. Maybe if you're talking about news for development, it just doesn't have to be information that comes on the impact that it's timely, but something that life really takes long to evolve, and that's one thing that the media should take into account. And as a journalist from the developing world, we have what we call development journalism, which tries to have feature stories. I know the North does that, but we're more concerned about feature stories, about things that are going to portray life in reality, and very little of news per se, because news is what a minister says, news is what a permanent secretary says, but oftentimes that's not what really changes things. It's what people do out there, and that's what's really important, I think.
Would you like to talk about the negative?
I think post-UNCED is very important, and basically I think UNCED is this UNCED is a big, great success just to have this one, but everything will start from after post-UNCED. This is a new starting point for a new fighting, I think. We need, where the post-UNCED, especially the role of media post-UNCED, very important, I think. I agree what you said.
And who knows, maybe we'll have some good news before this conference is over. It's not over yet. Maybe it will end on a very positive note. I got to feel it will. You want to?
Well, I just want to make clear that we are talking of a very subjective matter, because the editor of a newspaper or even the editor of a news program in a television station knows that there are thousands and thousands of news coming up on top of his desk. And it's up to his discretion and it's up to his selection just to pick up which ones are the ones that are fit to be news. Now, it's going to be impossible. Never there will be always 100% of people satisfied. There will always be people like you which will be dissatisfied. We have to hope that the editor, be it in a newspaper or in a television station, be enough responsible, socially responsible, and will keep a good balance of the news between the white and the black, so to give the people just the right way and the right possibility to think by themselves and pick up the reality of the problems in face of them.
Suzanne Elston, environment columnist, Thompson News. I'm from Canada. A comment to Mr. Turner and then a question. You've been addressed a number of times about the Global Forum. I understand you'll be talking there tomorrow. You've said that you were going to look into it. I encourage you to look into it today. My last report 2 hours ago is that they're shutting the power off, and who knows how much longer. They may not even be a Global Forum for you to talk at tomorrow. So there's an incredible urgency here, sir, and I really, please check into it. Having said that, you made a comment about how the journalists must do their job. Environmental journalists have to do their job. What is happening is that a lot of the grassroots news is not getting out simply because we can't do our jobs, because we just don't have the money to do it. Is there any way, Mr. Turner, that with your massive, wonderful communications network, that aside from getting, you mentioned that you have representatives from so many countries in the world, to tie into grassroots people to monitor things like web and econet, so that people like myself who routinely put out material can somehow get into your information network, and that's accessible to the world, because it's what the grassroots are doing right now. We are the foot soldiers, as we are told. What is here is important, but what's at the Global Forum is equally important. Thank you.
Who's next?
I'm Paul van der Beek. I represent a World Forum of Energy NGOs. What I also represent informally is the International Forum Energy Treaty. I'm an energy treaty negotiator. I would like to invite you, this is not the question, we work on establishing communication mechanisms to create a World Forum of NGOs. I think it will meet in January '93. To coordinate constructive inputs in, for example, the UN Commission for Sustainable Development. We established already some first communication channels, but we would like the press to help us to communicate with the governments, just because, like this lady said, the network here at Rio Centro, it's not very easy to obtain the information from the INGO or Global Forum, very concrete, practical information. We invite you. This would be maybe interesting to learn about our treaty method, which is establishing consensus principles, base our action on that, our action and implementation programs. And this we feed back to the Earth Charter by all the treaties and all the other NGOs. And I would like to invite government officials to defend their principles, to see if we can find some consensus already now.
What's the question?
It's no question, it's an invitation to come over to the second floor of Gloria, to the International Forum.
Okay, thank you. Who's next?
Lady over here.
My question's for Mr. Turner. My name's Natalie Draish. There's a lot of Canadians present asking questions today. I'm from Vancouver, Canada, television producer. I would like to ask you about the fact that there is a large constituency missing from this global arena, and I refer to the traditional wisdom keepers of the environment, the Indigenous peoples. The Indigenous peoples are not recognized here as peoples. There are a number of leaders, at least 150 leaders from all continents, who have done their homework in the PrepComs. within 24 hours, CNN could legitimize the status of Indigenous peoples and provide 8 hours of an open, unedited, uncensored Indigenous leaders plenary session complementary to Agenda 21, dealing with the Agenda 21 issues. And I ask you for your commitment, and if not, can you please discuss why media cannot legitimize and contribute to the government's legitimization of Indigenous peoples in this forum when in 1993 the year has been dedicated to the International Year of the World's Indigenous Peoples.
I'm very sympathetic and extremely interested personally in all the indigenous people, and have been for a long time, and we run a lot of stories about them. And I know there's a group of them here, and I guess they're getting some coverage. But the government leaders and UNCED conferences is what's taking precedence right here, right now. Maybe they should have another meeting separate from this where the spotlight could be completely on them, because their position should be heard. Who's next?
My name is Eddie Jesus. I'm from Manila. I like the composition of the panel, half from the north and half from the south. And I'd like to ask the panel if it believes that there is any basis to the observation that the northern global media controls the flow of information, and that the South must establish its own network as a countervailing force. Thank you.
I'd like to just answer that. I've heard that for a long time, and when about the second year after CNN was started, and we started making it, going on satellites to cover the rest of the world, I came up with the idea for the World Report, and every country is invited to send in a 3-minute story every week, and we run it on Sundays twice in the World Report, so that the South can be heard in its own words on a regular basis on CNN, available to the rest of the world. But if you want to create another agency, you're more than welcome to do so, and I'll subscribe. Be a first subscriber.
Jenny Richards, Television Trust for the Environment. We've been referred to twice on this panel, so I thought it might be a good idea to tell people in this room who don't know what we do. We were set up 8 years ago to help make more films on environment and development issues, and when they were made, to make sure they weren't just shown in the north, but that they were made available, rights cleared, for broadcast in the south. Now, Ms. Matemba mentioned Developing Stories, which was a series of 6 films from some of the most outstanding filmmakers in the south. It took us 3 years to raise the funding for that series. You can see them on the monitors at lunchtime in this building. You can also see them down at Global Forum. In all the 800 pages of Agenda 21, just 2 clauses are developed. There are just 2 clauses devoted to public information. What I think we ought to be doing here is starting up some kind of fund to make sure that Southern filmmakers have access to training and to funds in the future, to make sure their own voices go on getting heard, as in Developing Stories. Perhaps Ted Turner would be like the one who'd like to initiate a fund.
We already do it in World Report. That way every country is represented every week, and it doesn't cost millions of dollars because they're just short stories.
Mary McPherson from Scottsdale Progress, Phoenix, Arizona. For Mr. Turner, I'm only a neighborhood writer. I like to occasionally report on the newest and latest ideas. Will your sources of information, if we pick them up from your world broadcast, will they be right on the fringe so that we can be the first to break some new story in the local presses?
Well, I hope so, but I can't guarantee it. We do the best we can.
Otherwise, we're just picking them up from the regular papers, and that's somebody else has already made their choice.
We just do the best we can with it.
It's very hard to be in the forefront. You can't afford to pay for all the subscriptions on what the agencies are doing anywhere new.
Right.
So we need somebody like you with a little money that can get there first.
Right. All right, let's take one more question.
I am
John Hart from Helena, Montana in the United States. A number of years ago, Bill Norris, who was the president of Control Data Corporation, spoke about the corporate responsibility to help in social issues. The first speaker talked about cultural diversity, and I'd like to ask her how she might suggest that media might be more responsible in promoting cultural diversity, and then perhaps if you would also respond, Mr. Turner, to that idea.
I'll just give you one example of what needs to be done. We have our local broadcasting, well, national broadcasting channel, which is KBC, and we have Kenya Television Network, which actually is CNN. And one of the things we've been trying to push for is to have CNN, not just, KTN rather, not just broadcasting programs, soap operas and things like those, but having local indigenous theater or programs or movies that have been done in the South being broadcast. One of the programs that was very, very popular, over the last 1 month were the developing stories that I was talking about that were done by TVE in collaboration with others. Unfortunately, it was like always the last program, but yet people sat up to watch it and people are talking about it all over, which is a reality about what we live and what we do. And it's very important, for instance, to have Southern journalists filming about their own realities, and then that is broadcast out, or that is put on their media. But the quality of those programs was very high. They got assistance from more experienced journalists in the North to shoot those films and programs, so that helps quite a bit. That could be done.
Okay. All right, would any of the panelists like to make a closing remark?
First, go first. Okay. Then next.
I'd just like to emphasize in 2 words the importance of working together. The private organization, the governments, the people, and the broadcasting, and the broadcasters. And I think that because of the size of the problems, all these problems cannot be solved just by the government, or just by the people by themselves, or just by the private organizations or the individuals. We have to come up all together with the solutions that are for all of us.
I think that's a good way to wind it up. And you got anything to say? Hey, we enjoyed it a lot. Thank you for sitting here and listening to us.
I tried to say after you.
Okay, that was great. Okay, good work, man.
This is C-SPAN 2 coverage from the United Nations Earth Summit being held in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Leaders from more than 100 nations are gathering to propose and discuss solutions to the world's environmental concerns. Next, a series of briefings held by various delegations to the conference.